Hi, I want to talk a little bit about my field experience case study with a 6-year-old girl who just completed her first grade year and is extremely excited to start second grade. I have known this girl for a couple of years. I work with her mother at school. Her mother is actually a middle school teacher. And she's a very hardworking girl, but she's still developing her reading and writing, mostly her reading comprehension. Since I am very familiar with her mother, I never really sat down and actually interviewed her, but she lives with her mom, her dad, and she has a younger sister. But pretty much when I first met Abigail, she was a little shy because she didn't quite remember me. But once I started bringing back all the times that I hung out with her and been around her, she opened up. So when we went through the survey questions just to discuss her reading and her thoughts on reading, she didn't really have a hard time. But going through the survey, it really helped me actually understand how she felt towards reading and writing and anything that's done in school. From a recreational point of view, Abigail really enjoys reading. Her biggest thing is princesses, so she loves to read about princesses. But when it comes to school, she has a little bit more of a harder time. And it's not necessarily the books that bore her, but sometimes she feels self-conscious when it comes to her having to read aloud or her having to share her thoughts about what was read. To make sure I was able to talk with Abigail more than once, I visited her three times. 2 times were for about an hour and a half, and 1 time was for about an hour. Obviously, I got more done during the hour and a half because it was a longer time, but all 3 visits went extremely well. We would start off with her explaining how her day went. She loved it. And then we would do a couple reading passages. My goal was to try to get 1 or 2 done, but it never worked out, so we really only completed 3, 1 per session. Throughout conversations, we threw in a little bit of spelling. That way I was able to see her writing. I was able to get her off task of reading and focus on something else so she didn't get overwhelmed. As you see to the right of my screen, I have my observation survey summary sheet. So we read 3 stories. We read A Tan Dog, The Big Turtle, and Canada Geese. She was able to read with the direction perfectly fine, moving left to right. She made a few errors throughout the story. Canada Geese was very difficult for her, and I think it was because the words were so close together that she had to use her finger to help her follow through. When it came to the little quizzes, so how the reading sounds, she started off very average. She stuttered a little bit, and that I started to notice that was occurring more often. But as the articles were getting longer and, as I stated, closer together, the words were closer together, she started reading very slow. And it wasn't something to really be concerned about, but definitely slower than a 6-year-old. Since Abigail had to slow down her reading, I also started noticing that sometimes she didn't really comprehend what she read. So what helped was having a conversation throughout the reading. And I would like to relate this back to what we've been looking at in the Nichols book with the purposeful talks. One of the quotes that really stuck out to me was, "It's a process of negotiating and constructing meaning that pushes children to work at the cutting edge of their ability with language and propels them forward as English language learners." I feel having to use these communication skills throughout the reading really actually helped Abigail with trying to follow what she's reading throughout the stories. She had no problem with letter identification. She identified capital letters, lowercase letters, identified all the letters or the alphabet. The concepts about print, we read shoes. She related the words to stories. She understood the periods and what she had to do when she reached a period. With the words, her word attempts were average. Like I stated before, she stuttered a little bit, but her writing was great. She loves to write her name, so that was her biggest achievement. So we started practicing her last name just to introduce a few other letters. She misspelled a few words, such as come. She forgot the E since it's silent at the L at the end, but school is always tricky usually for young kids. They want to write SK, but she spelled it correctly, so it was awesome. Just to bounce back to my paper, the use of picture books was very helpful for Abigail because her problem was she couldn't really visually see what was going on in the story when it came to just a reading passage. And that actually relates to when I was younger. I had the same problem. And so one of the tips that I gave to Abigail was actually to try to be creative on her own and use her imagination to possibly put herself in the story or create pictures along the way as she's reading. Just to state a few more things about her writing, normally kids write extremely big, so it's not that hard to mix up some of the letters, but Abigail didn't really write too big. She wasn't all over the place. She does need to continue on her neatness. She has a couple letters that aren't necessarily in line, and then a lot of words are very close together. But as we went through working with this, we completed 10 vocabulary words every visit, and I saw a drastic improvement. So as I will recommend to the parents when I meet up with them to discuss this study with them, is to have her practice daily. I know the summer's coming and kids don't necessarily want to do work over the summer, but as I did when I was younger was I had to read every day for at least a half hour, and I had to write. So I'm going to recommend this to her mother because it helped me, and I would love it to help Abigail, especially with her reading comprehension. I don't want her to feel self-conscious when it comes to school, when she has to answer questions or read aloud. I don't want any of that stuttering to get involved. Just to reflect on this whole experience, it really was a learning experience. I normally work with high school math students, so this English is a little bit different. The fact that she worked hard every visit really helped. And then I know seeing her get frustrated, it was nice that I was able to relate to her because I did the same thing when I was her age. The last visit was the most challenging for her because we spent reading that Canada Geese, and I know it was hard, but she pushed through, and it was great to see that. What I would do differently would be obviously spend more time with her. You always learn more with spending more time, but I would love to review more vocabulary with her to help with the understanding, hopefully, in the readings. I've noticed she's very similar to, like I stated before, my ability when I was her age. But what I would do in my math class is I give vocabulary tests, usually weekly, but what I fail to do sometimes is to review that vocabulary that the students possibly got incorrect. With the Common Core standards, math has vocabulary that students struggle with, so that's definitely what I would want to do in my teaching and in my education experience. Thank you for taking the time to come watch this video about me talking about my experience with Abigail. Thank you. Bye.